The big shift for me was being able to work in the somatic realm, to be able to understand that understanding the pattern cognitively is one thing, but what's happening inside of my nervous system that continues to pull me towards that familiar dynamic, healing that and regulating that in my system shifted the trajectory for me and really changed the way that I attracted men. And so I didn't really find my first healthy relationship until I was 32, because it took time to, renegotiate that pattern in my body.
2, 1, 0.
Hi, and welcome to the show. This is Orion. Thank you so much for being here. Today, I have with me Lauren Zoeller. She's a dynamic 7-figure entrepreneur, host of the Aligned Love podcast, acclaimed speaker and author. She is the visionary founder of the Aligned Experience. Lauren is a leading expert in reparenting, generational healing, and somatic experiencing. Through her work, she developed the proprietary voice activation method, which has empowered thousands of successful men and women to heal from past trauma and take control of their future. In this feel-good, empowering conversation, we talked about, of course, healing trauma through the body, getting in tune with who you are and what you really want and need, soft self-liberation, and more. And now, without further ado, on to the show. Hey, Lauren, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, Orion, thank you for having me.
Yes, before we begin, maybe you can share one very fun memory from your childhood.
A fun memory from my childhood. We're heading into Easter this weekend, and Easter's always been such a big, just a big celebration in my family. So I think what comes to mind, because I just have it on my brain, we have 2 little girls, and this will be, my partner and I have not been together for that long, but this will be their first Easter with my family. And I think the fun memory is just seeing all of the kiddos run around the yard looking for eggs and just seeing the joy in their faces. And this year we've decided to add in something for the adults. So the adults are going to have their own Easter egg hunt this year.
Oh, wow. That's funny.
But that's the memory that comes to mind, just because it's fresh and we've been preparing to leave tomorrow to get ready for Easter.
Amazing. So you said this is a new relationship with the girls?
Yeah, fairly new. I mean, it feels like we've been in it for years, but I did a lot of work to call in really healthy partnership, and we've been in it for about a year. Yeah. So
that's beautiful. So congratulations. And talking about relationships, why is this your mastery, your fascination, the thing you share with the world?
Yeah, I think it's because I always believe that, the universe gives us in multiple lifetimes, gives us certain areas of our life that we are meant to step in and deepen our healing and deepen our relationship to ourselves. And for me, the area that was always very difficult for me was romantic relationships. From as young as I can remember, the first time I started liking boys, right? When I was super young, in kindergarten and first grade. We also have somebody that's trying to say hi here.
Oh my goodness. Who's that?
This is Jack. This is Jack.
Wow.
He has a lot of anxious attachment, and he's
I
supposed
like
to be
him
outside.
so much. He matches your walls.
He does. He does. We love Jack. He is a puppy. He is only 6 months.
He is a 6 months Great Dane. Like all of a sudden, if you're just listening, a huge dog showed up and gave her a hug, or
he's here to say hello. He just has he hurt his leg. Usually he's outside, but he hurt his leg, and so he's been inside. Anyways, coming back, relationships have been just where I've done the most healing, and they really have kind of catapulted me into finding out the most about myself and giving me the tools to love myself deeper. And so that's why I've made my way into this field.
Yeah. What was the problem with your relationships in the past? Like, what was the thing that was that made you search?
Yeah. Well, there were multiple scenarios, but I would say, the story that I talk about the most is that I had a history of dating men who had some sort of substance abuse problem. Like they were alcoholics. They were, they weren't really deeply in love with themselves. And so when I started to get into nervous system work, and just to give everyone background, I did not grow up in a family where alcoholism was present. I did not have an issue with alcoholism. Nobody in my family did. And the first time that I attracted an adult relationship with a man who had a problem with alcohol, and a serious problem, I was like, okay, bad luck, maybe. Then the second intimate relationship that I got into that was serious as an adult, he was also an alcoholic. And then there was a third, and then there was a fourth. And after the fourth, I realized this is a pattern. What's going on here? There has to be a reason that I continue to attract these types of men in my life. And that was really the turning point for me. That's when I decided to start to get curious around, it starts with me, and there's something happening that's calling these men in. And so at that time, I was starting to do some somatic work with one of my practitioners that I was working with. And I recognized that, I grew up in a long line of Polish women. All the women in my family taught me at a very young age that, you don't get to sit down, you don't get to eat your dinner until everybody has eaten first. And this pattern of selflessness of, if you're okay, then I can be okay, right? If you're happy first, then I can be happy, was deeply ingrained in the way that I was raised. And so what I recognized through this whole process and really diving into my nervous system was that my nervous system was familiar with this dynamic of, if I could save you, if I could be the one that's there when you get out of rehab, if I could be the one that gets you to rehab, if I could be the one that is there for you when you're struggling and it's hard, then I was worthy of love, because I had earned my place in your life. Right. And so it was one thing to recognize that cognitively. And the big shift for me was being able to work in the somatic realm, to be able to understand that understanding the pattern cognitively is one thing, but what's happening inside of my nervous system that continues to pull me towards that familiar dynamic, healing that and regulating that in my system shifted the trajectory for me and really changed the way that I attracted men. And so I didn't really find my first healthy relationship until I was 32, because it took time to, renegotiate that pattern in my body. And so that was a pattern that was really prevalent in my life when I was dating.
Do you think it was just epigenetic from the women that came before you, or was there any event or something in your childhood that happened that made you form a certain belief about yourself, or somebody you watched physically, like maybe your mom, that you kind of like took on her beliefs?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's deeper, just because, as a somatic practitioner, we learn and we know that, and I'll just give you context. My great grandmother, she came over here from Poland. And when she came over here, her husband at the time told her, listen, we just need to be accepted. Do whatever you need to do to just be liked, to just be loved. And so this deeply ingrained, we call it the fawn response. It's a survival response when we're looking at the nervous system, it's people pleasing. This people pleasing response became a means of survival for my great grandmother. It's like, in order for us to survive, we have to be liked. And so it was a survival mechanism, but the issue was that it was never resolved. It's one thing to do it because you need to survive. It's another thing to then never look at that survival pattern. And then it got passed down to my grandmother. And then my grandmother passed it down to my mother and my aunts. And then it got passed down to me. It just became this dysregulated fawn response. This nervous system pattern became so familiar that it was the only thing that I had witnessed as a child. So to answer your question, yes, I witnessed it. And then what happens is because that pattern was so familiar, it was also repeating itself in all of my relationships. So it felt like this is the only way I know how to relate.
I feel that now that you solved it, you actually solved it for other people in your family energetically?
Yes and no. I think that, I always say with the women that work with me, when you do heal these patterns, you are not just healing yourself, you're healing that pattern for previous generations and future generations. Yes. But I still see that response really alive in my mother when I'm with her.
Sometimes it takes time. It takes time for the shift to happen in other people. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that she has seen her witnessing my ability to use my voice
Yeah.
and to claim this sense of self-autonomy and not become the martyr for every person that I meet has led her into deeper inquiry around herself. But it's a difficult, and the thing is I always say, just because you quote unquote step into a deeper relationship to that pattern, it doesn't mean that it goes away forever. You're still going to have moments where you are going to have to face it head on. And that's healing, right? So, I don't really believe in the notion that we're ever fully healed.
I had so many questions and now I'm like, wait a second, which one am I asking first? I want to ask about the somatic experience that you teach. What kind of somatic practice do you do? And how is it your own method? How did you come up with that?
Yeah. So I am trained classically under Dr. Peter Levine. I went through the Somatic Experiencing Institute, which is an almost 5-year program by the time you complete it. So I am technically a somatic experiencing practitioner. And so I use his methodology of somatic renegotiation in my practice. After studying underneath him, I started to work with other somatic practitioners like Raja Selvam and different people that were in my field. And I started to recognize it's all based in somatic experiencing and tracking a client's nervous system to be able to introduce what we call a counter vortex to renegotiate trauma in real time. But a lot of the women that I was working with were, sexual assault survivors and women who really struggled to find healthy partnership. So I started to develop my own method within Peter's method that I now teach and I certify other coaches and therapists and healers under. And it's my relational somatic method. So a lot of the work that I do is very heavily based in Peter Levine's somatic renegotiation work, but it's a little different in that we're looking at how attachment theory and relational ruptures and relational patterns really affect your ability to relate and connect on a deep level. So that's the work that I do with women inside of my practice. And then I also teach other practitioners to do inside of their practices as well.
And what does it look like when somebody's having a session? Because it sounds like a bunch of big words, but I can't get the visual or the understanding of how it works.
Yeah. So what I tend to tell people is that, true somatic renegotiation work, it's difficult to put into words because it's not a somatic modality. We're not doing breath work, right? We're not doing tapping. We're not doing all of these fancy modalities that you see on the internet that are kind of touted as, something that's going to renegotiate your trauma. It's not that we aren't ever going to use breath work. It's not that we're not ever going to use tapping, but everybody's nervous system is different. So if you were in a session with me right now and we were speaking about something that you are struggling with, when your body goes into a survival response, there are symptoms associated with every survival response, right? So we've got fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Those are our 4 survival responses. For instance, if you're in a fight or flight response, I may notice that your fists start to clench or your eyes are darting towards the door. You're giving me physical signs that your body is in a sympathetic state. As a practitioner, I'm tracking this And then I'm leading you through different modalities to be able to get safety to come on board so that we can renegotiate that survival response in real time. So if you've ever experienced EMDR or brain tapping, it's similar to those modalities, but the difference is that with EMDR and brain spotting, there's no counter vortex that is introduced to renegotiate. In somatic experiencing, as a practitioner, I'm saying, okay, as I'm feeling into the resonant field, as I'm feeling into what's happening in your nervous system, what do I need to introduce so that I can see this survival response that's alive in your system? I can see this start to deactivate and fall into safety so that we renegotiate that pattern over time. So it's hard to explain what somatic experiencing is until you fully experience it, because every nervous system is different. And what I do with you is not going to be what I do with the person that comes after you, right? And that's part of the problem with these blanket somatic modalities like breath work, like tapping. They're great resources, but if you're, let's say you have an overdeveloped relationship to sympathetic charge, that's like really familiar to you. If you go into a holotropic breathwork session, you run the risk of actually re-traumatizing your nervous system because you blow past what we call your window of tolerance. So when you're working with an actual somatic practitioner, I'm tracking that to make sure that we're not re-traumatizing and we're actually renegotiating, it's a little bit different than other somatic modalities that are out there in the world.
Okay, what's renegotiating means?
When we talk about survival responses and we look at trauma, okay, and let's kind of break this down in a way that hopefully is tangible for people. Most people think that trauma is an event, okay? They think that I was in a car wreck, which means I have trauma. Trauma is not actually an event. It is the stuck survival response or the stuck psychosomatic response to any overwhelming event that was too fast, too much, or too soon. Okay. And when we go into the survival response, if we don't have the proper container to access safety, then that stuck survival response becomes trauma. Because let's say you're in a car wreck and it was at a stop sign, right? And you felt it. Your body went into a flight response. And there was a lot of panic after the crash, and there wasn't any space for you to find safety. Then what happens is every time you roll up to that stop sign, you may feel that same flight response over and over and over again, okay? Renegotiating that flight response means when you come into my practice, we're going to slow down that wreck. And I'm going to look at what happens when your body starts to roll up to the stop sign in your mind. And we're going to work with this flight response that's coming up in your system. And I'm going to give your nervous system the space to notice safety. And as you notice safety, we're going to watch your nervous system deactivate. We're going to watch your nervous system go into this flight response and then use your visual to recognize, whoa, I'm actually safe. There's no threat present. And I'm going to give my body the space to feel that. And then I'm going to give my body the space to find safety. And then next thing you know, let's say you come into my office or come into my practice a week later, we go through that same visual, you roll up to the stop sign in your mind, there's no charge. You don't feel that flight response anymore because you actually gave your nervous system the container to renegotiate that survival response.
When women come to you and let's say they have those patterns in their relationships, they can't find the right guy, usually it's based in a lack of self-love, lack of safety. How do you know what's missing for them, and how do you guide them apart from the somatic experience?
I have a process that I lead all of my clients through when they make their way to me. And the first thing that I do with them, if they have not done, traditional therapy, we've got to start to look at what are some of these patterns that are showing up relationally. What's the cognitive link, right? So what I mean by that is when I explained earlier I attracted alcoholics. I work with my clients to say, okay, let's talk about your past relationships. Talk to me about the patterns that showed up here. Also, let's talk about big moments in your life that you remember that feel like they have charge. I call those big T or little t trauma moments. Then I'm going to ask, okay, now let's look at your childhood dynamics and let's look at your generational dynamics. I want to get a full picture of what your life was like growing up. What were your relationships like? And what this first step does is it gives me a lot of context, and it gives my clients a lot of context of what are these patterns cognitively that keep showing up in partnership. Then once we can identify the patterns, then we'll look at, okay, now that we notice these patterns, I'm curious, what do you notice inside of your body when you think about these types of relationships? And based on that question, the body's going to give us answers, right? For instance, if you have a lot of anxious attachment inside of your system, chances are you're going to have an elevated heart rate when you think about those types of relationships. Or you may have the pattern that you leave when things get hard and there are arguments, you just pack up your stuff and you leave, right? All of these are based in the flight response. So then we can say, okay, now that we recognize these patterns of dysregulation, can we be with them? And can we start to introduce and become familiar with not just safety, but also that pattern in your nervous system so that it doesn't feel like it's flooding you and it's becoming overwhelming, right? So it's different with every single woman. We've got to look at what are the cognitive traits behind the patterns that you're experiencing. And then the level deeper is how can we look at your nervous system patterns that are in conjunction with those cognitive patterns so that we can start to shift those and bring different awareness to them.
And what shifts do you see in your practice? And how quickly does it happen?
Well, it depends, because our nervous system, again, every nervous system is so different. And I always tell people, and if you look at the definition of trauma, it's too fast, too much, too soon. So if you have somebody in the field telling you that they can help you attract a partner in 3 months or less, or they can heal your relationship quickly, you're actually exacerbating the trauma. Because if you want to heal trauma, you have to slow down. You have to develop a relationship with safety and with slowness and with this sense of softness inside of you. That's where true healthy partnerships come from. And so it depends, right? Some women can attract healthy partnership in 3 months because their patterns, their nervous system has a lot of capacity for resilience, and they can really orient to healthy love. And then some women, it takes longer. It takes 6 months. It takes a year, right? But I always tell my women, if you stay committed to it and you really, really fall in love with your nervous system and understanding that language, it's going to happen for you. And it always does. It happens with every woman I work with. It's different, in relationship to the timeline that it happens.
I like what you said about finding the safety inside. And how do you do that?
Through this work, through committing to nervous system work. Because if most women don't understand what safety feels like in their body. They can't orient to it. They can't find it. If I were to, with most of the women that come to me, say, what does safety feel like? They might rattle off something cognitively. But when I say, okay, now tell me, what are the sensations and the emotions associated with safety? They're like, I don't know. And the first step on this journey is being able to learn the language of your nervous system. Like, I know that when I feel safe, there's expansion in my chest space. There's warmth in my low belly. I can orient to my surroundings, and I notice that there's not a sense of urgency. There's not a sense of feeling like I have to do something. There's just this settled feeling. And so the first step is to start to build a relationship. Just what does safety actually feel like in your body? Not what comes out of your mouth, which is, oh, I'm safe when I'm like with my partner and we're holding hands and we're like walking down the street. Okay, cool. But what do you notice in your body as you're doing that? That's the more important question. And that's where we have to start. We have to start to build a relationship to safety so that we can expand it.
For me, safety feels like a like a warm pink marshmallow cloud. That's the image that came to mind when I was thinking about safety. I was like, yeah, it's when you're just like, you can let go and just feel like everything is holding you. Or like when you're floating on the beach, on the ocean, and it just feels so aligned. That's safe.
It is safe. And that's the first step, is to develop that relationship, and then also develop a relationship to your activation too, because activation is not bad,
Hmm.
right? It's not a bad thing. You just have an under coupled relationship to it.
What do you mean when you say activation?
So activation is what we were talking about with the survival responses.
Okay, okay.
Right? It's feeling that sense of your heartbeat rising, or that pattern of you packing up all your things when you get into a simple fight with your partner, with someone that you love, because you feel like you need to flee and you need to get away from it. It's, at one point, that activated response, that survival response, it served you.
Yeah, that was your safety.
Yeah, yeah.
It feels like safety in a masculine way, or safety in a feminine way, where the fight or flight, it's almost like you turn on your warrior, and you're like, I'm invincible and nothing's gonna stop me, and I feel safe regardless of anything, and I'm just gonna fight. Or you're just like in your true feminine, and you're in this like marshmallow cloud, and I'm so safe, and everything around me can just like, it's just gonna form around me, and I'm just gonna walk the world. you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Well, and it's, that's the sense of surrender that really does call in a magnetic life, is being able to say, what's happening, even if it's activation. Like, can I notice that my pattern is to pack up my things and get to the door? And can I stop at the door? And then can I have some grace for myself for this pattern? Like, can I hold myself and say, I see that you did this because it kept you safe in the past, but now we don't have to do it. And we don't have to be in shame around it, but we can notice it and we can embrace it and we can be with it and we can learn from it. And that is what it feels like to be in relationship to your activation. And over time, the more grace and the more love and compassion you can give yourself in those moments without it flooding you and taking you past your window of tolerance, and you actually packing your things and getting in the car and leaving, the more that those activated responses start to soften. And so, that's what it means to really be in a relationship with that.
Do you believe that every manifestation happens from a place of surrender?
I do, actually. I believe that, and that's difficult. No, actually, the answer to that is no. I believe that we can manifest from scarcity, and we can manifest from our reality is a reflection of our most predominant frequency. So if we're in the space of scarcity, if we're in the space of really grasping and holding on, we will manifest, but we will probably manifest the opposite of what we actually desire.
Yeah, I had to surrender to attract my man. I was in an abusive relationship, and then I became super masculine, and I couldn't date anyone. I would pretty much emasculate every guy I saw. And then I went to the seminar, and it was a relationship day, and there was a conversation about feminine and masculine energies, and I was very emotional that day. I knew something had to change. And that night I went to a little waterfall at like 1 a.m. and I wrote my relationship vision, and I prayed, and I was crying and laughing and crying and laughing hysterically. It was very cathartic. And 48 hours later, I met my man. At 1 a.m., I was introduced. And 9 days later, he proposed to me on a hot air balloon in Vegas. Yeah, and I said no. But but he had the diamond ring and everything. But 9 months later, I said yes. Yeah. But yeah, it all happened from a place of me telling God, like, hey, listen, I can't do it on my own anymore. And I guess there was some somatic release there with the laughing and crying and shaking and being like, okay, I'm done. I can't. I feel like I'm pushing a mountain and I can't do it anymore. So please help. And God, it just showed up, whatever you call God, divine energy matrix. Everything was aligned. Yeah. Yeah, I love it, but I do find the process of surrender is super hard for me, even though I know it's good for me in many, many areas of my life, even within my own relationship sometimes. It's difficult.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's a practice. And for me, nervous system work has helped me really deepen my relationship to surrender, um, and softness and slowing down. And I think that, when you can operate from that space, things come in with ease because you are in that space of being able to receive. You are receptive versus feeling like you're constantly working against the grain all the time.
Yeah. So what are some of your practices when you wake up in the morning to hug your nervous system, to calm down, to slow down?
Well, we currently live on quite a bit of land. And so it's shifted over the years. I'm getting ready to release a series about this. It's called the Soft Year next week. This is the first time I've talked about it. But, you know, I always thought that because I've always been a high achieving, successful entrepreneur, female, right? And there was a moment a couple of years ago where I realized, I keep looking for this softness and this surrender and this space to be in my feminine because I know that, a man's supposed to protect and provide. And if he comes in and he does that, then I will have the space, right, to be soft and to surrender and to be in this space of safety. And I recognized, about a year and a half ago, wait a second, no, I have to find that now. If that's what I want in my life, then I need to be that identity now so that I create the space to invite it in. And so, a year and a half ago, I was living in the city and I had to ask myself, like, I'm in this really buzzy high rise with so much happening. I have a podcast and so many friends here. How can I find softness? How can I find that sense of safety and space? And I started to create it. My mornings became less about getting up at 5 a.m. and going to the sauna and exercising and doing my affirmations and doing my visualizations. And I started to say, what would it feel like to just wake up and have a soft morning? And it changed. It totally shifted. And so, long story short, now my mornings are I wake up, I let the doggy out, I make us French press coffee because it takes quite a while. You have to boil the water. You have to let the coffee beans soak.
Is that a Polish thing? Because I had a Polish girlfriend and she always did that.
I don't think it is, but now that you say it, a lot of my Polish family and friends, they all do French press.
Like, this is one of the most cherished memories I have with her. Is that coffee? Okay, cool.
Yeah, so we do that. Maybe it is. I'll have to look into it. So I do that, and then I go out and we have a little barn cat that I manifested. So I feed our barn cat, and then we have chickens, and then I'll go feed the chickens. And we have ducks, so I'll feed the ducks, and then we have baby chicks. So I feed the baby chicks, and then I come in and I feed the dog, and then I have a cat inside, so I feed the cat, and then I'll take my coffee upstairs to my partner, and we'll talk, and then I will slowly get ready for my day. And so there's this sense of, I love my mornings because there's this sense of softness and this sense of slow that I craved. And so it's not what the personal development world preaches. It's what feels good to my nervous system. And that's what my morning looks like.
I was very surprised when I saw you on video because when I researched you and I looked at your website and your interviews, I saw a very different energy than the energy you showed up here today. And it works.
Yeah, it does. The work works. I promise. I promise. It's so funny because my team last week was like, none of our old branding fits anymore. I'm like, I know. And that's the beauty of this work, is that you continue to deepen and you continue to evolve. And that's where we are.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. So let's talk about helping women finding love. Um, what's the most dangerous myth successful women believe about love, and how did it show up in your own life?
Yeah. I think the biggest one that I see is that it's something that needs to be earned, right? We talked about that earlier, that it's something, I have a lot of women that come into my practice and they say, I'm afraid if I slow down, I'm afraid if I soften, I'm afraid if I really lean into this slowness that I've created, that I'll lose my success. I'll lose momentum in my business. I will lose the ability to, climb the ranks inside of this empire that I've created, or this life that I've created for myself. And I'm also afraid if I slow down and I soften, that a man won't find me successful. And if that happens and this gets ripped away, then, and there's this belief that their worth is tied into their career, and they feel like they need to earn love, that their success has replaced their ability to deeply connect. And that's a slippery slope with women, because there will never be a man that's good enough. And it's because they don't feel like in their core that they're good enough, and they don't have a relationship to softness and slowness and safety. So that's what I see the most in my practice when women come in and they're struggling to find love.
Yeah, it seems like a pattern. Like a lot of women these days, they gain all that success, but they can't find love. It's hard for them to make connection or stay connected. And then I think the excuse is that I am too successful, they cannot handle me, I'm too big. What would you say to them?
Well, it depends, because we would have to look at where did this pattern originate. But what I would say is that, to truly call in the relationship that you desire, the right man, that's not what he's going to care about, right? The relationship that you want, that is rooted in, conscious safety and connection, and this sense of like true partnership, it doesn't matter your success level, right? But you have to be able to love yourself wholeheartedly in order to call that in to your life. And I then tend to go a little deeper and call out the pattern. Where were you using your career to fulfill this sense of validation that you were enough? Because if you're using your career to do that, you're also subconsciously doing that in your partnerships, in the way that you date, in the way that you attract men into your life. You're looking for men to validate your existence. And that, again, becomes a really slippery slope, because there's no man that can validate your existence. Not one of them. You have to feel worthy of that first.
And how do you help women feel worthy of that? Let's say, okay, somebody cannot come to your practice, but they're listening right now. What are some practices they can do to calm down their own nervous system, or to validate themselves to themselves?
Yeah. One of my favorite practices is a cognitive practice and also a somatic practice. And this is the first thing you're going to do. You're going to get out a piece of paper and you're going to write down all of the beliefs that you feel are true as to why you don't have love in your life. Okay. So it could be, I am unlovable because everyone leaves, right? There are no good men left in the world. They're all taken. Whatever those beliefs are, right? And then what I want you to do is, after you write them down, I want you to look at each one of those beliefs, and I want you to feel how it actually lands in your body. Like, what sensations do you notice? What emotions do you notice? right? Chances are you probably feel constriction. You may feel your heart rate elevate. You may feel sweaty. You may feel like, oh my God, I want to run away from this exercise. I don't want to be here anymore. You're starting to notice all of these patterns. Most likely, those sensations and emotions are associated with survival. You're going to feel that in your body. And then I want you, after you write down those beliefs, I then want you to write the flip of that belief. So, for instance, everyone always leaves. The flip of that belief is I am loved and people do stay in my life. And here's where it gets, this is where most women stop. They stop at the flip belief and they're like, okay, yeah, great, but I can't really believe that. The next step is you have to start to find proof that that belief is correct, that that belief is right. So let me give you an example of this. I had a belief that every man always leaves, that I will never find love because regardless of who he is, even if he's with me for 3 years, he's going to leave. And I remember I actually had a friend that like woke me up to this. I remember when I was dating, I was like, oh, everybody always leaves. And like, I'm just so sick of this. And my friend looked at me and she said, hey, she's like, not to be mean, but I'm kind of sick and tired of hearing you say this because I have never left.
Oh,
like I have never left
wow.
you. I've never left. I've been here. And you keep saying everybody leaves, but I've been here. And I remember feeling that land in my body. Like, oh yeah, she has always been here. And I felt this sense of expansion and this sense of deep connectedness. And I said, whoa, I actually am more committed
To the story.
to the proof. Yeah, to the proof that goes along with that old belief. But yet I have all of this proof that people never leave. I'm just not orienting to it. So a really powerful exercise is to flip the belief and then make yourself find proof that that belief does exist. And I have not had a single woman come through my practice where we have not been able to build a case file for the opposite belief. And then the work is being able to understand, how does that land in your nervous system? And how can I orient to that all day, every day, so that I can start to attract from that space? Right. So that's a really powerful exercise that I highly suggest everybody do.
Yeah, when you change, the world around you change. It's like we live in a movie, and we live, and we're just like, am I creating a drama? Am I creating a comedy? What am I creating right now in my life? And which storyline am I the most committed to? Sometimes we tell ourselves one story so many times, we just believe it. We don't doubt it for a second. This is a great exercise. And I love that you stop to check how does it land in my body, because the body doesn't lie, right?
Right. Well, and that's the part that most people miss, because it's one thing to cognitively think these things. This is why I say, like, if you've struggled with manifestation in the past and you've done all of the things that The Secret tells you to do, and, you know, all of the webinars that I attended about manifestation.
I was supposed to interview Marie Diamond yesterday. She couldn't make it. Yeah, I love her, man.
Oh, bummer.
She's amazing. No, she's gonna come on the show maybe in a month or two. But yeah, I had actually a few teachers from The Secret. I had Dr. DiMartini, I had John Assaraf. Yeah, pretty good record. Yeah.
It is. But something that I feel is missing from The Secret, because I've watched it several times, I watched so many things on manifestation, was that it didn't teach, what do you do with your nervous system? It's one thing to cognitively think that, right? And where people struggle with manifestation, it's like, oh my gosh, I was visualizing it and I was seeing it and I was repeating it every day. But if your nervous system is still operating in survival around that thing, you're still going to attract from survival. You're not going to attract from connection and safety, which is what you need when you're manifesting really big things. So I just think that that's an important part to look at.
It's important part. Yeah, the movie was missing a lot for sure. Like when I spoke to Dr. DiMartini in private, he was telling me, I don't remember, they shot 12 hours, 48 hours, I don't remember, but a lot of footage, and from all that you got like the highlight 5 minutes that will be like the little candy that the audience wants to listen to. Everybody wants a very quick solution. Nobody wants to know that they actually have to, you know, do an everyday practice and connect to their body and all that. That's a lot of work. It's much easier when you watch.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's like if you want a new reality for yourself, we live in such a quick fix society. Go back to trauma, urgency, too fast, too much, too soon. The reality that you desire can come in quickly if you're committed to the work it takes to actually get it. And most people aren't.
For sure. So, what's the role? What role does God or spiritual alignment play in calling in love?
You know, I believe, just as you spoke about earlier, that whatever you surrender your life over to, and I tell people, it could be God, it can be the universe, it could be your pet turtle, if you have a pet turtle. But at some point in your journey, you have to recognize that true safety comes from presence and comes from the ability to release and let go and know that there's something bigger at play. And I'll tell you, the hardest part of my life, I grew up Catholic, and I really struggled with the Catholic faith. It just never really resonated with me. It felt like it was just this, I don't know, it just never resonated. I would go to church and I just wouldn't feel anything. And so for a long time in my life, I was searching, like, is this real? And it was one of the hardest times of my life. And when I started to become an adult and things started to get really big, I realized, you know, not believing in something higher than me, it's not really working. I'm pretty broke. I don't really have a healthy relationship. I don't feel connected to my body. Like, it's not working. My life's okay, but it's not great. What if I surrendered to something bigger to me? What would that even feel like? What would it look like? What if I just entertain it? And I'll never forget this moment. I was like, I'm gonna see if this is real. And my best friend growing up was my grandmother. I had a really deep connection to her, and I was crushed when she passed away. And when I was struggling in my spiritual journey, I remember having a conversation. I was like, Grandma, I know you're not here. I can't connect to God. Like, I can't feel him. I can't feel anything bigger than me, but I can connect to you because I know what it's like to be in your physical presence. So if there is something bigger, can you please send me a sign? Like, can you show me something? Can you show me something? And I was like, I just need something from you. Like, I need a letter. I need something to show me that you're here. And I remember, because this is what I used to do, after I had that conversation, I immediately called my mom and I was like, hey, do you have a letter from Grandma? Like, do you have anything from Grandma? Because I wanted to be in control of the situation, and nobody in my family could find anything from her. It was wild. And so that day continued. I went to bed. I woke up the next morning and I had this pull, and I just heard this voice, go into your guest room closet. And so I was like, okay, this is weird. Went into my guest room closet, opened the door, and there was this box that my mom had given me a couple months prior of just a bunch of old stuff that, you know how moms are. They give you these boxes and they're like, here's all your stuff. And I opened the box and there was this shoe box, this Michael Jordan shoe box full of old letters from old boyfriends and in kindergarten, do you like me? Check yes, check no. And I'm like, what the heck? Why did I get pulled in to look at these? And I'm going through all the letters, and at the bottom of the box was this butterfly letter. And it was at the very bottom of the box. And I opened it up, and it was a letter from my grandmother. And it just said, it was for my 6th birthday. And she just said, I'm so proud of the young woman you're becoming. You're going to do big things in the world. And she said, I love you, Grandma Ellie. And I knew in that moment, I have cold chills. I knew in that moment, okay, there's something bigger than me. I have it. And so once I was able to feel that and surrender to it, it then became my North Star. And I have a tattoo of that, of the I love you from that letter. And everything in my life that I've desired has been a result of really connecting to spirit and to the universe and to my grandmother, which I know is much higher than me. So it plays a really big role.
Connecting to I love you. I like that so much. Beautiful story. Very inspiring. Very appropriate.
Yeah, we have to remember, right? Like going back to the beliefs, I was deeply held and loved by her. And so to know that love helped me orient to the love I wanted to call in.
I love that. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. We are almost out of time. So before we say goodbye for now, what are your 3 quick tips to living a stellar life? And where can people find you? Take your courses, offers, all of that.
Yeah. So my 3 tips would be first, learn the language of your nervous system, get curious, like understand the body because it's going to change your entire life. The second thing that I would say to live a stellar life is to develop a relationship to the present moment, develop a relationship to slowing down, to safety, to savoring where you are now, because that will shift where you want to go. And the third tip that I have to living a stellar life is to tell people that you love them. Even if it's, tell people that you love them. And if you feel something on your heart, if you see somebody who has great hair or is kind, tell them. Like use your words to say that, because what you put out into the world, you receive back. So those are my 3 tips. And then people can find me at laurenzoeller.com and on Instagram at Lauren Zoeller. It's Z as in zebra, Oeller. And I have so many things that you can take advantage of. I have a lot of free resources on my Instagram page. I'm getting ready to launch a year-long masterclass series called The Soft Life that is launching next month. I have my collective program, which is a 3-month container. I have one-on-one coaching. So just come into my world and we can have a conversation. DM me on Instagram and we'll talk about what the best route is for you.
Amazing. Thank you so, so much. It was a pleasure. Thank you for your wisdom and sharing your heart.
Yeah, thank you, Orion, for having me. It was so wonderful to talk.
You too. And thank you, listeners. Remember to learn the language of your nervous system, slow down, and connect to the present moment. Tell people you love them and have a stellar life. This is Orion. Till next time.